Yeah, Wang. I probably shouldn't be laughing, but it's pretty hilarious.
No, it's cool.
Well, first question by Steph Hetty. Is there a particular psychedelic experience that has shaped you or changed your perception on life?
Yeah, I would say like the most shape-shifting or perception-shifting experience I had was with ayahuasca, and actually was a week before I got clean. And what ended up happening was my perception of my day-to-day life, I almost saw it as an outsider would see it, and it broke like a bridge. Like for me as an addict, I couldn't understand someone who is not an addict. And a story behind that is I went out to a restaurant with my mom, and she got like an $8 margarita. She drank half of it, and then she walked away from it. And I'm like sitting there looking like, that's a waste of alcohol.
Yeah,
Meanwhile,
yeah,
she's looking at me and she's like, you know, how could you do this? How could you be addicted to ice and do all these horrible things? Well, in this ayahuasca journey, I had a moment where I relived my memories and I saw them as my mom saw them. And I saw her lifestyle as she sees it. So it broke that bridge where I was able to see my life as a non-addict. And then a week later, like I had a head full of ayahuasca, and every time I used, I felt worse about it. Like my using was never the same again the week after, even though I was in addiction. And then I decided to get sober from that experience.
Is that the first time you had that kind of experience where you like kind of perceived life through someone else?
It's the first one that I had it to that intensity, and it was like kind of reliving memories or just seeing my life in a totally different view. Like my perception of reality was totally shifted. And not only that, it was like it was very cleansing of all these emotions I was stuffing for so long. So these substances weren't exactly the problem, they were the solution, and what they were solving were these emotions that I refused to deal with. But on ayahuasca, like sensitized all those emotions and forced them to come out almost like a purge. And, you know, that led to a lot of crying, throwing up, rolling around in my own feces. And
literally
in the fetal position. And it was very terrifying, most terrifying experience I had. But I remember one take back was one moment where I saw my life being controlled by like this powder or this substance. And it didn't make sense to me for the first time ever. And since that experience, when I got in recovery, I still had cravings for like 3 to 6 months. But after that, after 6 months, like no cravings whatsoever, which I never experienced in recovery.
How did you deal with the cravings?
I kept going. I was in a sober living home, and I kept going to like, you know, recovery meetings and kept kind of doing what everybody told me to do. But I remember being in a sober living home, and I told the guy, I was like, when are they going to stop? Like, when are they going to stop? He's like, I don't know, bro. And then
I don't know, bro.
One day they just stopped, and now I'm almost sober 5 years, and I look back and I haven't desired to use in 4.5 years. And
yeah, man.
I attribute part of it to the ayahuasca experience because, like, seeing your life, if you're an addict, or in my case, I was an addict, and seeing it as a non-addict sees it, even temporarily, it's not like hearing from the counselor. It's almost like being the counselor. It's like seeing it from the counselor's point of view, which was so impactful to me versus CBT, where it's like a bunch of words, and you're like, you don't see it the way they see it.
Right. So it's more like an emotional thing instead of just thinking about it. Do you like really smooth round rocks, like the ones that skip across lakes perfectly?
Oh, man. I mean, I'm not a skipper, and I've tried to. I've tried to skip to overcompensate for, like, you know, this.
What's this?
You know, like, you know, at the summer camps, you know, trying to impress the ladies and getting, like, 4 skips in, but I can't do it. I'm debilitated. I think it's because I have, like, weak tendons in my paws.
So you're indifferent between smooth rocks and rough rocks?
As long as it's not a crack rock, I'm pretty cool with the rock. I mean, that's not, like, my rock of choice. I like just standard rocks. Cement's pretty cool.
That's fair enough. What made you make a YouTube channel, and what did you hope to get out of it?
So when I made a YouTube channel, I was sitting in a AA meeting, actually, and there was a bunch of people who were like 3 or 4 or 8 years sober, and I was like 2 years, 3 years sober at the time. And I was like, we're all sitting here waiting for the newcomer, because the newcomer is like the most important person in the meeting. And I was like, why are we just sitting here? Like, I was already in digital marketing, so I knew how to grow channels and do SEO and do all these things. And I was like, we're just sitting here. And then I had the idea of, let's go out and do a YouTube channel that I do. And what my idea behind it was coming out and being completely shameless and sharing my experience with substances as it relates to addiction and my experiences with recovery with full transparency. Because the idea was there's such a stigma around addiction that people are afraid to come out and say what it really is like. So I named the brand Shameless Protocol for the ideology of maybe if I come out and I speak with full transparency, like someone will relate to it, like an addict will relate, or maybe a family of a addict is looking for some kind of clarity or understanding, and they'll gain that from the channel. Maybe it'll help the medical field understand the subjective experience, both with addiction and with recovery. And honestly, like, I didn't think anything was going to happen over it, and then it ended up like blowing up like last August.
When did you start the channel?
I started December 2015, and I didn't have many subs, and then like I had a time where I was getting like 2,000 subs a day. It was ridiculous.
2,000 a day?
Yeah.
Was it a particular video that made the channel blow up?
What is meth like?
Okay, yeah. It's got like over 1 million views, right?
I mean, honestly, they're just my subjective experience. Like, people have, I could go on Google and search like other people's experiences and recite like a parrot. Like, people want me to talk about smart recovery, but that's never been a solution for me. So
what's
not
smart
Google.
recovery?
It's like, it's a lot like AA, but it's more cognitive behavioral group therapy based.
Right.
And
okay.
I was like, I could Google and learn about it. I could maybe go to a meeting, but if this wasn't like what helped me stay sober. So like my channel is very about my subjective experience and like not selling recovery because, like honestly, it's just sharing like how I bought into recovery for myself, what's worked for me, and what worked for me might not work for everybody else. But it is like what it is, and I speak about it with full transparency and let people know.
I don't know if you want to answer this. How long was the longest meth wank you've ever had? What's your record?
Okay. I'm going to answer that one. Let me, like, my camera's actually, like, a little bit tilted.
Yeah, you know what? I am going to answer this.
It's an OCD thing. Like, I always forget one thing. So, in the video that I made that ended up exploding, I mean, I said I stayed awake for 21 days. I just know the day I started and the day I woke up in the hospital. So, there might have been brief moments of sleep. I wouldn't be aware of it because I was completely out of my mind. The day I went to the hospital, I thought aliens were coming, so I got out a phone book. I don't even know how I found one, to be honest. And then I started calling every number to warn them aliens were coming. And then I ended up calling the cops and said aliens were coming.
No,
and then
I think the question when it's meth wank, like how long's your longest masturbation session?
Oh, wank.
Yeah, wank. Yeah.
Oh,
maybe I forgot. Maybe that's an Australian term.
I would say like the longest meth wank I've had was 7 days and 7 nights, roughly. Okay. And I ended up being hospitalized because my penis got so swollen up that I couldn't pee.
Fuck.
And my mom ended up taking me to the hospital that day. It's very, very, very humiliating. I almost like wanked to death.
That's why I'm like, I don't think he knows what wank means. There you go.
So like I almost wanked to death, and like wank, no fap life, wank awareness. Don't wank for 7 days and 7 nights straight. It's a bad idea. And then you do, awareness. Don't call your mom to take you to the hospital like I did, because it's very embarrassing.
That would be. I probably shouldn't be laughing, but it's pretty hilarious.
Oh, it's cool.
If you had the power to legalize all drugs everywhere, or to be a wizard and destroy all components for a substance on Earth, including alcohol and nicotine, what would you choose?
I would choose to legalize substances everywhere, because to destroy all substances is to destroy like a lot of medicines. You know what I mean? Like that could be a problem, because these substances, they aren't inherently evil. They just like, if they're used for the wrong purpose and they're not used medicinally, they can bring about like a ton of negative consequences, horrific ones. But used medicinally in the right setting, these substances have saved lives, many lives.
Yeah.
People with even dysfunctional ADD, that, low doses of amphetamines fix, where they could actually hold the conversation. I think there's a lot of misdiagnosis in America, well, across the board, but, for people properly diagnosed that go into it with a medicinal mindset and don't just take it because the doctor said to, but do your research, maybe start low. Like, these things have saved lives.
Yeah.
And,
if you destroy all drugs, that would include, like, green tea and, like, all these mild kind of plants. So it would be plants.
Yeah,
you'd have to
coffee.
destroy all plants. Coffee.
Like, if you destroy coffee, I mean, like, if I destroyed coffee, I think I'd be the most not liked person in America, and that's saying a lot. Now, there are certain substances, if I could destroy them, I would, but it always usually comes back to the research chemicals, things like K2, MDPV, which is active in bath salts.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
kind of
yeah.
always circles back to the research chemicals. So if I could destroy all research chemicals, that would be what I would choose, number
Yeah,
one.
me too. Me too. Especially because they have, ironically, the least research behind them. But
Yeah.
do you firmly believe that drugs take you to different realms in time and space, or all that is nothing but subjective experience?
This is actually a pretty good question because this is like a dilemma I've had where I used to think, namely with DiMiTri, that it took you to an internal world on a breakthrough. I always thought that
Yeah.
people manifest like their own so-called demons, angels, reality, and like underneath the influence or breakthrough experience with DiMiTri, you see these things, you see this internal world that you've manifested, and that was like all of that was just a subjective opinion,
Yeah.
and it still is. I mean, I don't think we could ever truly know. And that's one of the most painful things about these experiences. You come back and you feel like an outsider because one, not many of your friends have been through it, and two, you're left with more questions than when you started.
Yeah,
Um,
100%. Yeah.
but what I have seen is I've seen people break through on DiMiTri and like external things happening. So one guy broke through, and anybody who's seen someone break through, it's terrifying. It like starts from the top here and it goes down like a quick wave, and you just see that they're gone. One guy, the lights cut off in the hotel as soon as he broke through. One guy was cured from color blindness. One guy started speaking in tongues that actually sound
Whoa.
like articulated language. And then a bunch of people, you could just tell they left their body. Like I was at a party and there was like maybe 50 people at this party, and it broke someone through on DiMiTri, and he laid back and he was making the weirdest facial expressions I've ever seen in my life. And he threw up, both. And basically the party, they turned off the music. We all circled him, and we all were like, they were all panicking, like someone needs to call 911, because we all could tell and recognize like this guy's not in his body. And so I would say, based on observation of the experience, I've kind of become more open-minded to the idea of it's the actual spirit leaving the body. Not so much the experience itself as far as being in it, but witnessing it on the outside, which is kind of crazy. Like seeing someone break through has actually changed my life. I was like, this is the most bizarre thing. And after the last time, I was like, I am never doing this again. I am never breaking anyone through again. I was like, I'm not touching this stuff again because I was terrified of it. I was
And
literally
have you
like,
touched it again since?
no,
No, that
that
was the
was
last
it.
time.
I mean,
Okay.
basically what happened was the guy screamed bloody murder. He thrashed his arms. He had like superhuman power. He like
Whoa.
flung an inside bed across the room. And, he came back and he developed OCD for about 6 months where he would keep obsessing about the experience.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
and also just from like thrashing his body around and screaming so violently, he actually like messed up like and basically I'm not sure what he did, but I know he had a rotator cuff injury from it. There
Yeah.
was blood everywhere. And
Fuck.
after
Pretty
that I
full
was
on
just
experience. Yeah.
yeah, and I asked him about his experience. And whenever someone uses biblical terms to describe their experience, that's when stuff gets real. Like I'm not religious or anything, but he was saying things like the wrath of God, and he saw this giant light made of love, and it just like destroyed him. And as much as this being wanted to be with him, he was incapable, and his body just dissolved into like it was
Mm.
just like when he described the experience, it terrified me. And I was
Yeah.
like,
Well, because sometimes,
let
like,
him
because you
with
can
it.
have an experience of the divine, but it doesn't mean that your meat vehicle can handle such an experience, which is why you need to work on the foundations. It's not for
Yeah.
everybody. Yeah.
And after that, I just felt like, including myself, I was like throwing people off of a cliff, and they didn't know how far they were going to drop. And I had an idea. It's kind of like the first time you go into this experience, you run, you jump off a cliff, you assume it's going to be 10 feet, ends up being like 8 miles deep.
Whoa.
And then
Yeah,
the
yeah,
next
yeah.
time you look down that cliff and you're like, wow, it's 8 miles. And then you have to think a lot before you make the jump. I call it like it's called pre-flight anxiety.
Yeah.
But there was these people that were
Yeah.
assuming it was a 10-foot drop, and I was throwing them off this 8 mile cliff, and I felt like part of me was responsible. And then I realized I was throwing myself off that cliff, and each time I threw it off myself off, it got deeper and deeper and deeper, to the point where I was like, you know what? I can't do this anymore. Like, now I'll stand at the edge of the cliff, and it looks like 1,000 miles, like an endless drop, and I'm just
Yeah,
that
yeah.
anxiety. I was like, oh, I can't do that.
Yeah, because you don't know where you're going to go. And like you said, most times, if not all the time, it just raises more questions at the end of the day. Where would you draw the line between drug use and drug abuse, as you two probably have experienced both?
Well, drug use for me is always like done with intentions that are typically medicinal, and it can be recreational to an extent, but I mean, I don't think it's ever like purely just recreational. Sometimes it can be, but not always. So like for me, drug abuse would include, yes, using or drinking alcohol once a week is recreational, but if that recreational becomes every day, like that recreational habit, and your daily goal is to just have fun, you might not drive, you might consume like so much alcohol that you aren't at risk for alcohol poisoning, but it's still, like, in my experience, has hindered my life. It's slowly eating away at your liver. It also like deprives you of REM sleep. So, that's an example of abuse on a dependency scale. And as far as abuse of overconsumption, I mean, that's to me like something that comes across as pretty obvious when, you're taking ludicrous amounts of a substance and you haven't used the test kit. You don't need that much for what it is you're hoping to get out of it. Yeah, it's like if someo's using alcohol recreationally, they don't need to take 10 shots at once.
No.
Like, that's abusing it. And then, also like harm reduction measures prevent abuse. So if you're going into a deeper experience, make sure, like, don't just say I'm not going to drive if I drink. Give your keys to a friend or something. And it's the same with entheogens. Always have a trip sitter. It's like jumping into things with no research, no protection, no testing. That's abuse for sure.
What do your family and friends think about your channel?
So this is a pretty good question, because when I put it out there, I don't have a record. I'd never even gotten a traffic violation. So when I put out like this channel and I'm like, what is this like, or what's heroin like, what's meth like, geez, this guy's been addicted to everything. So it's like my channel is my record. And luckily everybody has commended me on it, because they see my primary goal is recovery advocacy. I think that's a big step in it.
Yeah.
And even like Channel 8 News, when they picked up on my channel, like, they wouldn't just do that. They saw that this is recovery advocacy at its core. But I remember being with a like big client that was a wealth management firm, and they had a lot of money and a lot of prestige and a lot of class. And then my contact there, the PR person, stopped me in the middle of the conference room and said, I have a confession to make. I was like, what? She's like, I found your YouTube channel. And I just froze. I was like, no.
Whoa.
I'm going to get fired. But she ended up commending me for my channel as well. So like, a lot of people have been very supportive, including my family and friends, even like my boss at my old job, and clients that I have pretty much across the board have been very, very kind.
Yeah, so everyone was cool with it.
Very, very supportive.
Nice.
Even the media, Huffington Post, and all these like websites, Tube Filter.
Yeah.
Very supportive.
What's your opinion on someone who's in the military and trying to teach people about psychedelics as well?
I don't know if I have an opinion on that. I really feel like, they like have you in a line and they're all serious. Like if I was on a psychedelic, I would just start laughing for no reason at the guy. I'd be like, y'all are so fucking serious. Like, why are you so serious, y'all?
And trying to teach people. It's like, wait. Why are we killing these people?
Why are we doing this?
Yeah, what the fuck?
Why give flowers to the enemy? They're like, here you go.
Yeah, so I don't know about teaching people in the military when you're in it. Unless, I guess, you talk about specifically MDMA therapy, healing war veterans with PTSD. I guess that could sort of bridge the gap between the psychedelic world and the military. But apart from that, I don't know.
It's actually interesting, because like there wasn't, I don't know too much about this, but I know the first experiment the government did was with LSD, and it was actually on soldiers in the military. And that's one of the reasons that there's this whole conspiracy theory that the government's anti-entheogen or anti-psychedelic, which I think has some weight, but a lot of it comes back to that experiment, because when the government gave the soldiers psychedelics, they would stop fighting, and they would just be hanging. Because they used it for mind control. They were trying to use it for mind control, and ended up doing the exact opposite.
Yeah, mind expanding. All right, do you have any experience with Amanita muscaria? If not, would you ever try it?
No, and honestly, I wouldn't try it, because people relate it to salvia, which is the most terrifying thing I've ever done. It just sounds terrifying, and I know it's more dangerous than psilocybin. In the sense that you can overdose, you can have a seizure. I don't know, I'm not positive about overdose, but I know people have died from it. And I'm like, I don't know why I would do that to myself.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah, well, it relates to salvia. When people say anything is kind of like salvia, I just run from it because that was like terrifying. That was the most morbid thing I ever went through.
Yeah, I don't know. It's weird with the obscure drugs because I get people asking me that all the time. Like, would you try this? Would you try that? Would you try this? It's like, no, not really, because I feel like I have more to lose than I have to gain with that kind of stuff. And like you said earlier, usually having a new drug experience just, gives you more questions than it does answers. So I'm trying to just refine what I do know instead of just adding more to the pile.
Yeah, that's pretty much where I've been at for like a long time now. And like as far as trying new things, I'm always very wary because you never know how you're gonna react. So always start low. But Amanita just always like there's certain things I never tried, like bath salts, obviously. LSD I never tried simply because I couldn't know my dose and I couldn't know what was in it. And
Yeah.
test kits, it's safe practice, but it's not 100%.
Yeah.
And even if it's pure LSD, you still don't know your dose. So I never did that. Never did K. Well, I did do K2. Actually, I take that back. But as far as Amanita, that was one of those ones where I was just like, I'm scared of that. That makes it more scary because
Yeah.
legal things are actually scarier. Like K2 and bath salts and salvia were more scary than anything I'd done, and they were all legal. So
Yeah.
just the fact that Amanita is legal where I'm at makes it more scary, I think. Because if it was fun, everybody would be doing it and it wouldn't be legal.
What is your biggest motivation to continue staying clean/sober?
Ooh, that's a hard one. There's so many of them, to be honest. I'd say like my biggest motivation is a new way of life I've discovered in recovery. So it's very cliche and it sounds very like fruity and stuff, but I use substances to solve a problem. Like I started using when I was really young, when I was like 17, 16, which is really young in retrospect. It started with pot, and when I used, honestly, I like had no friends in high school. My parents were abusive through parent alienation and other ways. So I felt like alone, and I was bullied by both women and men. I was physically assaulted numerous times. And honestly, like pot was a way to fit in. So when someone offered it to me, it wasn't like a question. But you have to understand that the reason after I smoked pot wasn't really pot. The first time I drank alcohol, I saw the world in color. I felt self-love. I felt like this is the me I should be, and this is the me that people will like. Because before that, like when I tried to socialize, I was awkward and nobody liked me. So I learned to just be quiet and kind of isolate. But with alcohol, like I could finally socialize. So it was like a solution to a problem I had up until I was 17 years old. And I kept stuffing those emotions of inadequacy. So when I got into recovery, rather than drinking to solve that problem or using substances, I started doing a lot of action and taking a lot of action as far as being of service to others and being honest and making amends for things I did wrong in the past. And all these things, like writing down the resentments from my childhood and trying to let go of them, working through them, seeing my part in them. And all these things led to like a newfound joy, inner peace that I never knew existed. It's like the greatest experience I've had. It's the greatest quote unquote high. So I think like a big motivation for me is to hold on to that internal gratification, because everybody sees the external, like, they see like that I have a decent job or I'm doing this or I'm doing that. This, that, and the other, but those are all just reflections of what has changed internally.
Yeah.
And it's something I wish I could communicate to anybody struggling with addiction. I don't sell recovery, but I feel like if people could see through like this perception temporarily and be like, wow, he used to be like addicted to ice and H and all these hard substances and totally be messed up. Like I was like, now like 180 pounds. I used to be 96 pounds, which is like basically skin and bones. I was picking at my face. I had scabs everywhere. I had long hair and a really long beard. I looked like an anorexic, like Irish Jesus, and smelled really bad. And I was at the bottom, like junkie status, and like I was miserable. I was completely miserable, and to see how bad that was, even before my addiction, see how little self-value I have, and turn on this new frame of perception and see life the way it is today. It's like if I could see this and knew this was the end result, like I wouldn't have been so afraid of the change. Because in recovery, like you have to change so much and it's so terrifying, but I didn't know what the end result was going to be. And now that I see it, and it's this internal peace and joy, serenity with my surroundings, like that's my number one motivation, to stay clean. Not losing that stability of like, in substance abuse, all the joy I felt was really artificial. It was like manic episodes, so I felt more of like a stable joy. It's not like manic ups and depressive lows. It's just stable. I could do the next right thing. I'm at a capacity to be there for others. And when I go to bed at night and I lay down on my pillow, I can feel good about my day, which is something I never could have in my substance abuse. So that's the one thing I would hold on to, not want to give up.
I want to sincerely thank all my patrons for helping make this video possible. If you wish to see more videos and want to see me do this full time one day, then head over to my Patreon page. Even donating as little as $2 a month really does help. And plus you get some pretty cool perks, which includes a Patreon exclusive Q&A video every month. A big thank you to CG Kid for jumping on the show. Make sure you subscribe to his channel and check out Shameless Protocol. And if you haven't seen my last video, make sure you check it out. It's a short documentary on drugs. Can't go wrong.